in times in previous roles where I felt maybe that there was resistance or I wasn't being as well received in the type of work that I was pursuing, oftentimes I approached it from a point of view of advice. Like, you're the expert, you being a member on another team who I'm trying to influence, you're the expert. And I have an idea and I'm looking for advice from you. I need your expertise in order to understand if how I'm thinking about this is going to resonate. So having relationship building skills is really, really important in this role. Otherwise, you risk alienating others and maybe being perceived as naive and just kind of dismissed.
Hey, thanks for checking out the show. That's Jill Stoneberg, Senior Director of Social Impact and Sustainability at Virgin Voyages, the award-winning cruise ship division of, well, Virgin, as in the Virgin Group, holders of a suite of ultra-cool brands like Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Hotels, and yes, Virgin Galactic. All were founded by Sir Richard Branson. Cool, right? Well, that was something that we joked about, but I can tell you, the work Jill's doing and the progress she's making on the soon-to-be 4 cruise ships that they run is no joke. They're turning heads and helping push the cruise industry, which is not typically thought of as a beacon of sustainable development, forward into a more, well, sustainable future. And that's what I think is really cool. While many professionals in this role work their way into it through product design, marketing, communications, or an engineering track, Jill was seemingly born into this work. She went to an environmental studies high school and has been on a steady path of sustainability-focused positions since her undergraduate studies under a major that she created. You see, in college, Jill couldn't find a major that addressed the environmental and social sides of sustainability and that considered the role that business plays. You know, that idea of a more thoughtful, triple bottom line approached way to doing business, so she created one. Since then, she's earned an MBA in sustainable management and worked in sustainability for companies like Avaya and Intuit before landing what sounds like a dream job for her, one where she leads the company's sustainability and social impact strategy and works collaboratively and cross-functionally to identify sustainability priorities and define goals and KPIs. Additionally, she often briefs senior management and may or may not have interacted with Sir Branson himself on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG topics and performance. You might be surprised to learn how holistic sustainability was already baked into the vision of the Virgin Voyages company, even before Jill arrived, and how many initiatives Jill has executed and rolled out since her hiring back in 2018, which was before the first ship's maiden voyage. But what likely won't surprise you is how passionate Jill is about this work, how much she believes still needs to be done, and what she hopes to achieve in her lifetime. This was a really fun, insightful, and inspiring conversation. Jill's love of the company, the work she does, her energy, and her hopes for the future are infectious. And one can't help but get drawn into her vision and aspirations. This ability to draw you in and get you on board, okay, pun intended, is what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, even if you have all the right credentials. So with that, and without further ado, here's my conversation with Jill Stoneberg of Virgin Voyages.
Welcome to Good Things Happening, the show that explores the sustainability progress that's being made just under the surface at your favorite brand or company. I'm your host, Derek Sabori, and these are the people making it happen. Alrighty. Are you on a cruise ship now? Are you cruising right now?
I wish I could say that, but no, I'm in the comforts of my own home.
Oh, well, Jill, so great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to have a conversation about all the great work that you're doing, and just sort of looking through your resume and your history, working in sustainability and impact, and especially working now with Virgin Voyages. So, you ready to talk sustainability and impact with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it.
Well, let's get into it. You are the Senior Director of Social Impact and Sustainability at Virgin Voyages. I first heard about you from our mutual friends at Pangea Seed Foundation. They do some great work, and they came to one of the board meetings just saying they'd done some work with you, and that while they were cruise skeptics, they were really impressed with all of the great work that you were doing. And so they were so kind to connect me with you. And now we have a nice mutual connection because I'm working at Think Parallax. And I know they put out a really nice sustainability impact report that you put out in June. Was that the first one that you had done with Think Parallax?
So that was actually our second version. They did such a great job really bringing our story to life that we worked with them with our last report as well. So yeah, it's great to have mutual connections, and thanks for sharing the insights with Pangea Seed Foundation. Akira and Trey, who lead that organization, were excellent to work with. Was so impressed by their work, and I'm hoping that we'll be working on future projects together. So it's a small world with sustainability, right?
It's a small world indeed. And I hope the same, that you'll be able to work with them. And for those that are just listening, if you haven't heard of Pangea Seed, Trey and Akira did an episode here a few months back, so be sure to go check that out. But about you, your role there, Senior Director of Social Impact and Sustainability, tell us a little bit about what that entails. That's an amazing title. That sounds so cool. But what does that entail though? What are you working on every day?
Yeah, gosh, it's sometimes hard to describe succinctly, but I think the best way of putting some color around it is I get to look after how we show up in the environment, how we show up in communities and how we show up with our crew. So I work across the business to make sure that we are considering our energy waste and water footprint, that we're considering our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we're considering our impact on communities, and ultimately staying true to our purpose as an organization. We're a purpose-driven company, purpose-driven brand, and a lot of our purpose has to do with being a company that does good in the world. So it's a real privilege. It's also a team effort. I can't do this work alone. It really requires collaborating with my colleagues and really understanding the business and the challenges, and that there's trade-offs. So every day is very dynamic. There is no cookie cutter day in my schedule. There's always something different to work on, whether it's carbon footprinting or if it's our communications to our sailors on board or to our stakeholders like board of directors or external community members. There's always something. So it's a very dynamic role, very exciting, and I really love what I do. So I feel very privileged to have the opportunity.
Yeah, for those of us in this space, and for, I talk to a lot of people who are young and aspiring, they want to get into this role. They're always asking, how do I get that job? I mean, this is a dream role. It's with a really well-known company, or at least part of a company. And that's one of my questions is, Virgin seems like such a cool brand to work for. They're, innovative. I've heard it described as innovative in a fun and approachable way, but Virgin's always been known for having that cool factor. Is it as cool on the inside as it seems on the outside?
It is, actually. It is a very cool place to work. I think it's, again, it's been such a privilege to work there. And at first when I was hired, I was like, I don't know, am I cool enough to work here? But yeah, it is a very cool place to work, and also very down to earth. People are very approachable, no matter the level of seniority one is in the company. We have some core values that we live by, and one of those is having what we call one for all voice. So meaning it doesn't matter your rank or what department you're in, you should be able to talk to anyone at any level, and your voice matters. And I've certainly found that to be true in the organization. And I also love how, as a Virgin brand, there's a sentiment to say yes. It's not a risk adverse type of brand. It's about possibilities and innovation and failing fast, if you will, so it really embraces some of those traits of like a learning culture or learning organization that isn't afraid to take risks. And that's been really exciting on the sustainability front too, because it allows us to think kind of outside the box and think about things a little bit differently, of not what do I have to do, but what do I get to do? What cool project do we want to try, or how can we move the needle forward when it comes to doing things a little bit differently or better than how they've been done in the past. So very fun, dynamic work environment.
Yeah, and that seems like that's culture that's baked in there, right? And obviously, I'm going to go back to the cool enough part. Obviously, you made the cut. You're cool enough because you've been there for more than 5 years. I mean, right? So at this point, and I've seen you as a spokesperson for the company and for the initiative. So it's great. So congratulations for
Yeah.
making the cool cut.
You don't have to be cool to work at Virgin. I think everybody, we talk a lot about bringing a cultural add to the organization. So that's also something I really love about Virgin Voyages specifically is we're not trying to fit people into an environment. We're asking people to bring their authentic self, their passions, their interests, their gifts, and contribute to the culture that we're building. And that sense of belonging is so important. So, at first, I think when I joined and I was like, I don't know, do I fit here? Like, am I cool enough? I think because people really embraced the expertise that I brought and like my energy and, being able to talk to anyone allowed me to fit and thrive in our culture.
Yeah, from like the little promotional pieces that you guys have done, I mean, that's a big talking point is people really saying, hey, we get to be who we are. And it's so welcoming and it's such a kind of a family vibe. I love that. I think you guys are doing a great job with that. That seems to, I'm sure, come from the top though, right? So kind of looking at the structure, it seems like the CEO of Virgin Voyages is Tom McAlpin, but there's Richard Branson. So I don't know the whole corporate structure. One of the first questions I have to ask is, have you been able to work with Richard Branson? What's it like working with one of the world's most famous entrepreneurs, Sir Richard Branson? Have you bumped into him, got to work with him?
I have, although it's been limited. So I know that is really confusing. I think it's a general question a lot of folks have with any Virgin company. They think that Richard's in the office, right? Or
yeah, his hands are in it. He just sent you an email while we're here.
Yeah, it's not like that. But Richard is very passionate about, I'm sure, all the brands, but Virgin Voyages in particular is, I would say, near and dear to his heart, if I can speak on his behalf. He's been very supportive of our ship launches and the celebrations that we have. And so he's been very much involved in the business. And we actually just did a really cool voyage a couple weeks ago out of Athens, where we celebrated Virgin brands and people who have been sailing with us since we launched in 2021. And Richard was on that sailing. He often joins different promotional events to engage our most loyal customers and also to share, more about the vision of all Virgin brands. And so we're really grateful for that. So I've had the opportunity to work with him. Have had a couple of very brief conversations, but also what has struck me with Richard is that he is very approachable and, he'll give you time to, share what you're working on. And he has a genuine curiosity and interest in others. And so that was something that I found very, very cool, to talk to him. And he was like, tell me about some sustainability stuff you're working on. And so to have that opportunity was really unique.
And then in that limited time, you're like, where do you want me to start? What do I plug? Which part of it do I dive into? It seems like, I know, baking in this culture, I've seen it, said that there's a commitment to making a positive impact on people and planet. You guys are calling this creating an epic sea change for all. I know how hard that is to kind of bake that in and constantly make that so that everybody knows. I'm imagining that message comes from the top. Do you really feel like you're making progress where everybody really feels that and knows that and can speak to that and is participating in it? Or is that where some of the work still needs to be done?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, they talk about sustainability and how, I think you'll see it written in a lot of sustainability reports anyway, like this is baked into our DNA, or that's like the aspiration that they have. But I can honestly say it is part of our DNA. And we actually have measures against that. So as you rightly stated, our purpose as a company is to create an epic sea change for all. That's how we've translated the mandate that all Virgin brands have of changing business for good. So our changing business for good statement is create an epic sea change for all. And then we have defined, well, what does the sea change really look like according to some key stakeholder pillars, the oceans. What does it mean to create a sea change for the oceans, for our communities, for our crew, for our sailors and our partners? And those have been kind of some of the guiding principles that we've used to create the experience. And so with that in mind, we do survey our crew to say, how connected do you feel to our purpose? And we do an annual survey. And the last survey that we did, 92% of our crew felt like they were connected to our purpose. Wow. And that's pretty high, so to be a purpose-driven company and to, to be leading with doing things differently, and our crew to really understand it and be passionate about it and feel like their job and responsibility is part of fulfilling that purpose, I think is a really strong testament to that foundation that we built from the very beginning. So before we had ships in the water, we had a purpose that guided how we developed the experience. And that's been the foundation that we've built everything off of.
And so I want to talk a little bit about how maybe that compares to some of the other companies you've worked for, the different roles that you've had. But I want to kind of lay a little foundation of how long has Virgin Voyages been sailing? Because it hasn't been that long, right? It's relatively new.
Yeah, it is relatively new. So we had planned to launch in 2020, but we know what happened then.
Things happened.
Yeah. And so our first ship actually came into commercial operation in 2021. And then we brought our second ship on in 2022. Our third ship came on this year. And then our last and final ship will come out next year.
So that's really impressive, I think, right? And reading through some of as I studied up and kind of tried to prepare, it seems like because because Virgin Voyages is so new, you were able to build out these initiatives, build sustainability from the beginning. You sort of backed into what your end goals were, because already if you've got 2 sustainability reports, 2 impact reports out, full, very thorough, aligned reports, which I'll put in the link so everybody can go and check them out in the notes. But this was intentional. I mean, right? There's a lot of intent here in terms of if you're just launching this, you were going to do it right from the beginning, and you've been there since the beginning, then from the launch, right? So did you tell us a little bit about crafting that and what it was like to start from scratch this way?
Yeah. So actually our purpose statement and the pillars that I mentioned, and even defining what the pillars looked like, existed before I came into the role. And so it almost carved out, okay, we need a sustainability and social impact lead to bring these aspirations to life. So really that's kind of how I saw my role. Everything wasn't fully baked, if you will, but I already had that steer, that North Star that said, this is what we're aspiring towards. There are already key commitments that were in place. So for example, not having single-use plastics on board as part of the experience, all of the decisions around utilizing the most energy efficient technology that was available on board. Several different key commitments were already in the works and already in place before I joined. And so when I came into the role, it was having like a steer, if you will, and then making sure that there were proof points and policies and programs that were bringing those principles or aspirations into practice and making them a reality. And then also articulating our purpose in a way that could be digested to any interested stakeholder. So how do we tell that purpose story to new crew that we're joining, whether it was a headquarters or it's crew on our ship? How do we tell that story? How do we tell it to our investors? How do we tell it to communities? And so even just doing that first impact report was such a big endeavor because there was so much that we were doing, and I needed to kind of put it in a way that would be easily digestible for all audiences, and also kind of tell a narrative as well, that this is our sea change story, and here's how we unpack each part of it, from our operations to how we treat our crew. But a lot of those commitments were already in place, which is pretty incredible, to think about starting from scratch and rethinking maybe how any industry operates, but in particular how cruise lines are typically set up.
Agree. So hats off to Virgin for having those in place when they brought you on board. But then, applause to you for that. The easy part, I think, in one way is laying them all out. Sure, you can have your strategy, you build your pillars, put them on paper. That takes commitment. But then executing on those and fulfilling
Mhm.
them, and like you said, having enough in place to be able to communicate it. That's all. That's the hard part of the job of, I think, really filling in and backing into those parking spaces. So this was a good collaborative effort, it sounds like. And I always refer to this as sort of like a grilled cheese approach, where if you've got the heat coming from the top down, that's good. Sounds like you got it. But it also takes heat from the bottom up. All of our stakeholders, your employees, leadership has to be involved, and everybody's got to be working together to melt that cheese just right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like it's really working. And tell me a little bit about one and two. Before I forget, I wanted to commend you on this. I never hear passengers referred to as sailors. I think that's so great. They're
Oh,
always
no,
like,
we have our own terminology.
it's so cool. It's so cool. So we're all sailors on your voyage. But how does this company compare though to, because you've always been in sustainability, it seems like, when I kind of run through and look at your past experiences, and I want to jump to that. I want to talk about education, your career path. But for now, how does Virgin compare to some of these other roles that you've had in sustainability? Because you've been corporate responsibility manager, sustainability manager, you've worked in a couple of different industries, you've done consulting. Does
Mhm.
this sort of stand apart from those other experiences in any particular way?
It does, in the sense that this is like the first time I've been able to take on the breadth of a sustainability role, like from, all the different facets of what goes into sustainability. But reflecting on, my professional journey and the roles that I've held or the industries that I've worked in, I can certainly see how the experiences that I had in each one of those positions have built off of one another and have helped me be ready for this type of role today. So every experience is so different, so I started my career in renewable energy. And through that experience, I actually worked a lot with sustainability managers in brands and different organizations. And I just had a curiosity, like, okay, outside of renewable energy, or maybe at the time it was about carbon offsetting or purchasing renewable energy certificates to green up their energy footprint, I was really curious about sustainability overall. Like, what about the other facets of making sustainability relevant inside of a business? And so, I pursued my master's in sustainability at Presidio Graduate School. And then from there was able to be on a true sustainability professional journey of working on sustainability inside of companies. So I worked in telecom, I worked in software, and there were some similarities in the roles, as far as understanding sustainability frameworks, working collaboratively with other teams, putting together a strategy. There were some nuts and bolts that are very similar, but the cultures of the companies were all very different. And where I sat in the organization was all different. But this has been the most, I would say, robust position out of all of them. So I think looking back on it, I've taken pieces of what I've learned in each one of my roles. And I see how having had that experience in those other companies really made me ready for the role that I'm in today.
And can you expand a little on what you mean by where you sat in the organization? I think I have a visual and an understanding, but tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I learned a little bit about, for example, being a consultant and what that's like and how far you can really advance sustainability when you're on the outside of an organization versus on the inside. So I learned about that when I was in a consulting role. When I did corporate responsibility at one company, I sat in the legal department. So the culture there was really about compliance, and it was a very risk-adverse culture.
Yeah.
When I sat in a sustainability position at a software company, the culture there was very innovative, and I was in the procurement department and more of the operations, like building operations department.
Okay.
So,
Maybe even efficiency or, cost savings kind of things, right?
yeah, it was like that, but it was also about like how they were communicating sustainability to their own employees because it was such a draw for talent. And yeah, so it's just different. Every company's different. And now I sit in the brand department, but there's always an ongoing conversation about like, well, where should I sit? But I've kind of come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter where you sit, like what department you fall under when you're doing this type of work. What's most important is that you can work across the organization as well as directly with the CEO to be an advisor on sustainability issues, right? So I'm like an internal advisor to our teams. I also do a lot of work on specific projects, but you have to be able to work across and up.
Yeah. So basically you are everywhere. You sit everywhere. But I think you're so right. It's such a skill though. And that's what I love about these types of roles is you need to be able, like you said, to speak to every role, every level, every department, every function, to be able to come in and say, hey, tell me about your work. What do you do? And you need to be an adaptable learner as well, because you kind of have to say, tell me about fuel, tell me about navigation, tell me about waste, tell me about the kitchen. So we have to learn because we have to be able to hear and then say, okay, gotcha. Let me go back and how can I make our goals align? So such a nimble, role. And that's what keeps it so exciting, right? Every day is just a little bit different. You're always
you learn
evolving.
So much. Yeah. And sometimes, that can be a little tiring of, I got to onboard this person or sometimes I think in this role too, there's a sense, or maybe it's more of a personality trait of like wanting to understand everything or be an expert in everything, but you can't, right? So you have to be able to know what kind of questions to ask specific teams or how to understand what their goals and objectives are and how those goals that they have and what the goals and objectives that you have, how they can complement each other. So in times in previous roles where I felt maybe that there was resistance or I wasn't being as well received in the type of work that I was pursuing, oftentimes I approached it from a point of view of advice. Like you're the expert, you being a member on another team who I'm trying to influence, you're the expert. And I have an idea and I'm looking for advice from you. I need your expertise in order to understand if how I'm thinking about this is going to resonate. So having relationship building skills is really, really important in this role. Otherwise, you risk alienating others and maybe being perceived as naive and just kind of dismissed.
Yeah, there's a lot of navigating that needs to happen, right? Where you're like, hey, I'm not coming in to tell you how to do your job or what you need to do by the end of the month, but I'll explain my point of view. You tell me yours. And there's a delicate dance there for sure, because you want to remain sort of the good person in the room. Like, hey, I'm not here to disrupt things. I'm here to help move us all along.
Right.
And from my perspective too, I know how important optics are. I was in a role too that when I made it was the vice president role of sustainability, and this was at Volcom. And one of the things they did is sort of said, hey, they tapped me on the shoulder at a meeting, and I was by surprise, like, hey, we want to move you upstairs to this room. It's 2 doors down from the CEO's office. And to me, I mean, that was a really big moment. But I knew too, I'm like, wow, they are really taking this seriously, because they wanted to create the perception that, hey, this role matters. It's an elevated role. Derek's got the ear of the CEO and vice versa, so I think it sends a message to the company and to the organization when you can walk into any of those rooms or you build those relationships with leadership. So I think these are good bits of advice, I think, for anybody building out their sustainability roles and departments for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it's not always easy, right? I mean, I think too, it's a recognition that I think at the end of the day, sustainability will only go so far in an organization as the CEO is willing to support it. I think that's just the fundamental reality. And it's not always easy to get that agreement or buy-in or maybe support across different departments in an organization when you're trying to advance initiatives, because, they're busy. They have other things that they're working on. And even though I might be passionate about what I'm doing or I see how I can help them, that's not always reciprocated. And so you have to also be really resilient in these types of roles and like just be really mindful of the business climate that you're working in, and patient too, that sometimes it's about being opportunistic of when it is the right time to really lean in on what you're advocating for, and when it's the right time to say, okay, now it's not the right time, even though I'm trying, I'm not getting where I need to go. So I'm going to shift gears and pivot and pick another priority. So you really have to kind of navigate those dynamics internally too.
So true. And that can be frustrating, right? Because you know what you need to achieve, what you need to address. I know you've talked a lot about, sustainable marine fuels and switching over to things. And of course, you want to drive for that. But if now is not the time and it's not available, and that's going to be more disruptful or harmful to the company, or cut too much into the bottom line, then you sort of have to put that on the shelf, very visible, so you can still see it and everybody can see it. But yeah, you kind of shift your priorities to something else. I think that's how I think a lot of people get into sustainability roles, because if you understand the business so well, where you're not going to come in and disrupt, and you can have patience and sort of back off where you need to, put the gas on things where you see the opportunities. Yeah, what a great, it's a really fun opportunity and role. And I think, kind of looking from the business side, then if we transition on that, kind of pivot on that topic, you're on the site, it sounds like Richard Branson has said, success needn't compromise sustainability. And I found that really interesting, because typically a lot of times we're always trying to say that we can't let sustainability compromise our success. And I think this goes with that conversation where it's like, hey, Jill, we really support the work you're doing, but hey, we've got budgets, we've got deadlines, we've got X, Y, and Z. But it sounds like, you're the company saying, no, just because we want to do well, it doesn't mean we can't do less in sustainability. And I think it's interesting too that you guys were named, best cruise for the money by US News and World Report. So you've got all of these sustainability initiatives, but you're able to keep costs, relatively fair. There's this unique philosophy on it. Does all of that kind of play a role in the progress that you're able to make? That philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're able to have, when we were building the company and the experience, there were a lot of conversations that were had about sustainable options that we were pursuing and the cost. And in most cases, actually, to be transparent with you, it was a higher cost. But there were areas where we were experiencing savings because of the way we designed the experience. So let me give you an example. So with removing single-use plastics, right, we are generating less waste, which means you're offloading less waste in port, managed. And also we were investing in more reusable items on board, which had a longer shelf life, right? So it all kind of balanced itself out. And then any disposable products that we still needed that maybe would have been a single-use plastic item, we chose to invest in products that were plastic-free and tree-free, that were like truly sustainable. And there was a higher cost associated, but because we were saving money in other places, we were able to look at it on like a cost neutral basis. And so we would have conversations like that. So we couldn't just look at something as like really narrow in scope and say, well, these disposable products are more expensive, so it's going to increase our expenses overall. It was really looked holistically from, okay, we're generating less waste and that's going to offset the higher cost. So it was really considered and thorough. There was discussion, and that's not always the case, right? Like sometimes we aren't able to go all in on the sustainability commitment that we want to because the costs are higher or there's trade-offs. And I think that's the reality, is that there's always trade-offs. So it's having that kind of wider view on where savings might be happening somewhere else, and also factoring in things like what does a consumer want today, and how can we elevate this commitment that we're making to have a higher quality product in a way that will delight and meet kind of the customer expectations of who we are as a brand. So another example is like specialty coffee. We partner with an organization who is direct trade in their practice. They pay their farmers well. Some people might say, well, coffee is coffee, but we actually really communicate this commitment that we've made to the coffee provider. And we think our customers care about high quality coffee. And so we showcase that, and that balances out as part of the overall experience we want to deliver.
Are you able to, how do you keep track of all that? Because trade-offs key word. And there are environmental trade-offs, right? It's very hard to decide, well, which is truly better. It's like you've got the pluses, the minuses, depends water, energy, emissions, deforestation, which, indicator are you looking at? But how are you able company-wide, I guess, to always track those trade-offs? Or is it just sort of mentally, sort of, qualitatively keep them in mind? Do you have a system in place to like really track those across the entire organization when you're making decisions?
We have more data points.
Mm-hmm.
And these trade-offs are always under consideration. So we might make a decision, before we launched, and now in practice, we learn we can't get the product that we want to everywhere. So there's a trade-off like, we can actually only make this commitment when we're sailing in these regions, for example. So there isn't like a master spreadsheet of trade-offs or anything like that. But I would say things are always under review. And we've learned in time too that when we have an ambition in place, we aren't always able to make good on that ambition at 100% of the level. Like, for example, for availability reasons, is one example of why not. But I think it's just being mindful, like have the ambition, aspire to get there, try to get there. And when you can't, understand the reasons why and assess, what would it take to realize that ambition? What would it cost? How is it going to be valued? How do we communicate that or elevate that so people are aware of the commitment that we've made? And honestly, we have more improvement to do in that area where we have made a commitment and maybe we're not even communicating it as well as we should, so people actually know what we're up to.
So when you say we, and when we're all of this that we're just discussing, do you find yourself often working on this alone and sort of kind of mapping this out and thinking through it all because you're the expert in the space? Or do you find yourself working in committees often to kind of get that multi-stakeholder, perspective? So I'm sure it's a little bit of a hybrid of both, but how often are you finding yourself working across, cross divisions?
Yeah, well, I'm always working across different teams. I would say primarily my focus is working more on with the operations teams and with the itinerary planning teams. I would say those are like the two key groups that I coordinate with the most on a day-to-day basis. But it has to be collective. I mean, definitely there's project work that I do, and I have one person on my team, and we do a lot of like planning, communicating, and implementing, so we can't just direct and say this team needs to do that. Like we need to do the work ourselves as well.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. But collaboration is key, right? You can't do this work alone.
And I think, we can extrapolate that out as well. I'm sure for the industry as well, there's probably a lot of work that's being done collaboratively in the industry, I would hope. And I maybe want to touch on that, but I do want to get a sense. So we've kind of laid out sort of operationally how it works, what skills it takes, kind of what you're working on every day. I want to know kind of personally, did you always know and think that you would be doing this type of work? I mean, this was your undergrad, you did sustainable management, you have your MBA from Presidio, or your master's from Presidio as well. Is it an MBA? Yeah.
MBA, yeah.
MBA is in sustainable management.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it seems like you were on this path from the beginning, but tell us a little bit about that journey of ending up as a sustainability lead like this. Is this where you wanted to be from the beginning?
Yeah. So I really didn't have a very clear vision from the very beginning. So I actually went to an environmental studies high school. So I would say that's where the seed was planted.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to do work in sustainability or in somehow making the world a better place. I knew I wanted to do that kind of work. I didn't really know what it looked like.
Yeah.
And that just kind of set me on a path. So when I did my undergrad, going from an environmental studies high school to my first year in college, I was looking for more environmental classes and more kind of like environmental philosophy. And I wanted to understand how business fit in there too. So it was just like kind of curiosity that drove me. But at the time, there weren't classes or there wasn't a major in sustainability for undergrad.
Especially that ties to business, right? I mean, you could have kind of gone into ecosystem, forest management, or, municipality kind of work, but this idea of merging with business
It
Still,
didn't exist. It
I,
didn't
st-
exist.
I still
Yeah.
think there's a lot of work to do, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so what I ended up doing was designing my own major after kind of just like searching, like what I just want to piece these things together. And I think I called my degree in the end like environment and society because even then it didn't
Oh,
have,
I love
a
it.
name. But I found
Yeah.
myself going. I went to a series conference. This was like in 2022. And I felt like sustainability as a profession was maybe just starting to kick off then because they were doing like GRI reporting for companies. So it was really when I was able to kind of connect the dots and see how business fit in that really led the path. And then, the rest is kind of history because I went right from undergrad into working in renewable energy and then getting exposure to, oh, this is what it would look like to do sustainability inside of a company. I just knew I wanted to do something around addressing climate change and sustainable development. And then it kind of just led me from there.
Yeah. And I almost feel like, I mean, this might be naive to say, but I feel like from my, I guess, circle, it feels like that your story is an anomaly. I feel like at least a lot of the people in my network, we didn't come up through that path, right? A lot of sustainability people, they might come from the product side or from operations or from the legal team, or just it's a passion. We catch on to it. We're like, wow, I need to learn more. And you're put into this role because there's trust and you understand the organization. But a lot of was my journey, at least. I had to go figure it out. I mean, I had my undergrad degree in art. I went back for an MBA and I was working in the textile and apparel industry on the brand side, but I knew nothing about sustainability. And when I had that moment of it being introduced, I remember just going, how is it that I don't already know this? So I had a lot of catching up to do. Do you ever, that puts you at an advantage, I think, but do you hear more of my kind of story, or in your network, your industry, do you feel like, no, a lot of people kind of were, we came up through this, through our education. We were, there was a nice order, leading up to this role. What do you see
Yeah.
most?
I've definitely seen more of what you've described, where people
Okay, that makes me
find
feel better.
passion. There's certainly advantages to that, right? Because if you understand the business and how the business operates, you can understand the levers that you can pull to have impact, right? Whereas if you're just coming in with a sustainability perspective, probably a strength that you would have is like systems thinking, like understanding how the pieces fit together, understanding like how sustainability frameworks are developing. But, so much of what even I've learned in my time, just speaking specifically about Virgin Voyages, like I had to come in and learn a whole new industry and I was drinking from the fire hose.
Oh, I bet.
I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah. How many had you been on a cruise at least before you got the job?
I went on one maybe like 20 years prior to accepting the job. And
Yeah.
so,
How
and it was
funny.
like a very, distant memory for me. And so really I didn't know the business, but I was so excited by the opportunity of what I saw Virgin putting out there. So I knew I wanted to be part of it. But man, I learned so much and I still learn, 5 years
Sure.
later, I'm still learning, about the business. And so, but that also was an intentional approach that Virgin took into hiring and building a team. They didn't want people to everyone from the industry. They took people, it was basically they cut people, like the pie, if you will, into thirds. And they wanted a third of people from cruise, a third of people from another industry. And I forget what the other third was, but
But it was important.
oh, and a third of the people at the beginning, I think, were also from other Virgin companies. That's what it
Oh,
was.
okay. Oh,
And
interesting.
so it was like infusing the culture with the industry expertise and then the outside in view of, just understanding, kind of taking the best things of other worlds is kind of like how the company got started. But in terms of like, developing the experience and the different departments, it was very intentional from that point of view. So they were looking for someone who wasn't from cruise, most likely, for my role. And so I was very lucky in that sense.
Well, you brought up the word I was going to bring up again, is just intentional, right? It was designed intentionally. They wanted a variety of perspectives, obviously,
Right.
which is really important because you get everybody's sort of different viewpoints on it. Man, it'd be really interesting just to see that sort of that pie and the vision. I'm really impressed with how this is all rolled out, and I think it's really interesting, just from speaking of perspectives, our different roles, where I had to sort of look outward and go learn sustainability.
Mm.
You had the sustainability, you needed to look inward and learn the organization. There's, I'm sure, strengths and challenges and opportunities on both sides. But yeah, I was really fascinated by that, and fascinated to hear that you went to even an environmental high school. So yeah, you've got good pedigree here. So we've got a lot to learn from you. How funny. And then this leads me then to, I want to talk about sustainability just in general in the cruise industry, because I wonder too, because you've been on this path, you've been doing everything right. Do your colleagues ever be like, Jill, how are you in the cruise industry? Like, of all the, why didn't you stick in renewables or climate change, climate action? Let's talk about this. In our prep conversation, you were like, hey, I know it doesn't have the best reputation. And yeah, that's no industry does. I mean, every industry, no matter how great of work they say they're doing, there is dirtiness underneath it all. So tell me about the challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when I first
of it.
joined. I remember a couple of conversations with some leaders actually, and they were like, "Are you for real?" Like,
Are you a spy? Are you a spy? Are you a mole?
yeah. I was like, "What do you mean? Of course I'm real. Like, I care about sustainability." And it's like they didn't. I don't know if it's that it was newer to them. They also, one of in particular was sort of like more from the industry for a very long time. But yeah, I mean, I think once people understood that my interest or passion was from an authentic place, that helped build trust. That I was showing up authentically. But yeah, certainly I've gotten comments in my time of, "Wow, your job is really hard." Because oftentimes I might be saying something in a room that's not popular, or maybe it's not what everyone wants to hear. And so I'm mindful of that at times. But also what I've learned in my time in the industry, and this has been the case since I joined, is there's a general acknowledgement in the industry that the industry hasn't been a very good storyteller, and the industry actually has been doing a lot in terms of sustainability, especially when you compare it to the industry it's part of, which is shipping. It's been quite innovative. A lot of people don't actually understand how a cruise ship works. I certainly didn't have that understanding when I first joined. I was definitely the more like, I don't know, like a cruise line. I'm not, or taking a cruise for vacation. I don't know. That doesn't really appeal to me. But then when I saw what Virgin was putting out there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a cruise I'd be excited to take. And,
Same.
for a variety of different reasons. But,
Yep.
Yeah, so I've definitely gotten the question over my time of, are you in the right industry? You really care about this? And I honestly do. And I think that it's because there is still such a big opportunity to influence the industry and to be sustainable. Like all industries have a long way to go, all companies, right? There's a journey that every industry and company is on. And their sustainability is so high on the profile of the industry for a variety of different reasons, whether it's from the carbon and emissions standpoint or from how cruise lines show up in communities. There's over-tourism concerns. There's a bunch of things that make it in the headlines, I would say.
Yep.
That make the job really interesting and then also rewarding when you can show up differently. Like when you're exploring sustainable fuels, because it really hasn't been done.
Right.
Or when you do community impact, and it works, or there's positive sentiment that comes back. Like it's very rewarding. So I think it's those moments of feeling like I'm part of something, and it is part of this wave of change that the industry wants to embrace and wants to do, because there's a lot of well-intentioned, passionate people in the industry doing good things. And I don't necessarily think that's known broadly.
So there's a communications. It always seems to be a marketing challenge that we have, whether we're talking
Yeah.
about climate change, climate action solutions, the industry initiatives. Because I think we also people get scared of coming out and talking about too many of the good things because they feel like they're going to be called out, and I understand that.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think what you're pointing out, which I think is so important, is that individuals can change companies. Well, can change departments, for example. Departments can change companies. Companies can change industries. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where you're at, is in a company that's so influential. And when I'm sure there are other sustainability initiatives going on in the industry that I don't know much about, but for sure they're listening and watching, going, "Wow, look what Virgin is doing. They did it
Mm-hmm.
again. They've got this other thing. They're in communities. To your point, they've eliminated buffets. All of those initiatives that you've got. You're converting your waste, energy into fuel or energy. I forgot how it works, but we can run through those initiatives, but for sure that catches the industry's attention. So you're on the path to, start nudging an entire industry, which that's powerful.
Yeah, yeah. We're a small player and we have had influence, and there are other lines doing really good things, and but our brand recognition is so strong that even when we aren't having maybe the volume of impact, by making a commitment and having it influence others, it is like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exciting to be part of a brand that can lead in that way and have such influence in that way.
Well, and that's why I think, the power of brands doing sustainability and powerful, influential brands, to me, is one of the most exciting places to be
Mhm.
because of that opportunity. You might, like you said, have a smaller footprint, but wow, you've got a bigger voice or a
Mm.
really influential voice. So I think that's awesome. Let's do you feel like, I want to stick on there just for a second, with the industry in general, do you feel like though others are making good progress? If you sort of had a speedometer, like are they up and it's like, hey, it's all systems go. There was a lot happening and we can
Mhm.
tell listeners to go check it out, or it's like there's could be moving faster. There's a little bit of mix. Give us an industry picture in terms of
Yeah.
sustainability and
Gosh,
climate
I
action.
always feel like we could be moving faster. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest frustration or pain point, probably for all sustainability professionals. But it's like, we need to go. Like, there's a sense of urgency here. Like, we need to keep going, going, going. And while we're doing a lot of great things, like, we're not doing enough. No one's doing enough. I mean, definitely the industry is doing some pretty incredible things. Like when you think about what the future of like emission-free cruising might look like. I mean, some brands are further along than others, are investing in new technologies and really kind of shaping what the future will look like and taking leaps of faith on an investment or a new technology. So definitely there is commitment in the industry, and many different brands are doing some really noteworthy projects. And that's really honestly what's needed, right? So it's
Yeah.
not about like being the best out of the bunch. I mean, we all need to do this together. And so if what we're doing can up the ante, and vice versa, when someone else does something, we notice it too. And so it just like creates that, like the bar keeps getting raised.
Yeah.
And so I think overall in the grade, when you think about how is the industry doing overall, the industry, like I said previously, acknowledges like sustainability is high on the strategic priority of what the industry needs to pay attention to and continuously improve upon, whether it's community work or missions, where our crew are hired and how they're treated, all that. Like sustainability is a top priority, and everyone is part of our industry association is all aligned with that priority.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Which of those, you talked about kind of innovations out on the horizon? I've got two-tiered question here because you've got a whole list of initiatives that you guys have in place. And again, like I said, I'll put the links down there so people can go and see them, but we should touch on a few of them at least. I want to know sort of which of those initiatives that you're currently doing or tackling are some of your most favorite, most exciting. And then also which of the solutions that are out on the horizon, innovations, are you most excited about? Kind of give us a
Okay.
sense of what do you hope to back into, and start with whichever one you want future solutions or your initiatives that you're most excited about?
Yeah, well, really in the end, as far as like environmental impacts and minimizing environmental impacts, it comes down to the fuel that we use. And so what I've found really exciting about it's both a near and future term is just the acceleration and scalability of sustainable marine fuels. So this is an area I've spent a lot of time on in particular over the last year. And I've learned a ton. And sustainable marine fuel is very nascent. We're looking at like advanced waste-based biofuels, for example. They're not available everywhere. But if these fuels were available in many different ports and they were affordable, the exciting part is that these fuels could be used today with existing technologies that are already on the majority of ships. So it's just a matter of having like the right policies and incentives in place with governments and, regulations that would force that type of innovation and availability. And so I've been doing a lot of work in this space, and we're just about to do our first sustainable marine fuel pilot. So more to come on that. And that'll be a huge milestone because we've been talking about it for about 2 years, and we're finally going to use the fuel for the very first time on our ships.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And then as far as future technologies, I think everyone kind of has their eye on like green hydrogen, and so many different advances in technology would need to happen in order for that to be affordable and available. And that's like an infrastructure issue as well. And so I think that's probably one of the most exciting things that will happen as we look out the next 30 years. But it's very blurry as far as how that actually is accelerated in real life. Yeah, so I think that's, but it's going to take a portfolio of sustainable technologies in order for us to decarbonize. And all those technologies, cost money. And it's not just the industry that needs to be on board. Like I mentioned before, it's infrastructure, it's partners that all need to prepare for decarbonization. And so it's a massive, massive effort. But I think to me, that's the most exciting sustainability challenge and opportunity it's all about the fuel.
That's exciting. And I'm glad you're a part of it. And I was learning a little bit about just the 40-60 rule that you point out too, that 40% of the fuel is used for propulsion, or is it the other way around? There's 40% and 60%?
40% is the hotel load. So think about like all the energy required to, have
run the daily operations,
cabins and the public spaces. And then 60% of the fuel is used for propulsion. So we're getting from A to B. Got
it. Well, in addition to that, you've got this Climeon technology where you're transforming heat from the ship's engine into clean energy. You're purifying wastewater. You've got a climate action plan. I love that. It's so interesting that you've eliminated buffets. That seems to always be the talking point of cruises, is just kind of the food waste. And that's a big one too, because food waste is one of the number one topics that we can address for climate action, right? As a climate solution. So you guys are taking that. Your terminal is LEED Gold, LEED certified. Like you said, you do all these port community impact initiatives. Anything else that's in there that you really think people should know about? We'll send them to the website and the report as well. But those are all really good.
Yeah, thanks. Well, there's a bunch of different commitments, as you point out, just to kind of continue the list. One of our value propositions is that we take care of our crew so that our sailors don't have to. And so all tips and gratuities are included in our voyage fare. So that gives us the opportunity to ask for a tip for the environment. So that's the only tip that we ask for, is a tip for the environment. So when our sailors are on board, they can opt in to make a donation to our nonprofit partners. That's another one. And
those are usually ocean related, right? Is it like a tip the ocean kind of thing? That language I saw throughout as well, just sort of how important the ocean is, the most valuable resource, right? The power of it. So I like that's cool too. Sorry, real quick, does the nonprofit change? Does it revolve and evolve? Do you sort of or
Yeah, so
is it local? Is it regional?
yeah, so we're actually shifting more to a regional approach, but we do have a couple of strategic partners. One of those is Moat Marine Laboratory. They are based in South Florida. And then another partner is Virgin Unite, so the Virgin Foundation, essentially. And the scope of work that we support through Virgin Unite has to do with mangrove protection, restoration, and planting. And so Virgin Unite has a whole scope of work just on mangroves and the importance of mangroves as part of the blue economy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really great to be working inside of the Virgin network to advance our shared priorities. And then there's a bunch of other nonprofits that we work with that are regional, or maybe we work with them because of a strategic initiative that we're advancing. So that's where Pangea Seed Foundation came into play. And then we've also worked with other Virgin nonprofit organizations as well, like the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship, to host a 3-day small business boot camp for entrepreneurs on our island destination of Bimini in the Bahamas. And there's other nonprofits that we work with too, just more on a localized basis. So it's a really robust network, I would say, of organizations that we support and then causes that we support. But we do, for our Tip the Ocean program, we hone in on ocean conservation.
I love it. I'll have to, I'm not sure if you've seen Sea Trees, if you're working with Sea Trees at all from Sustainable Surf.
We've had conversations. Yeah, we really wanted to try to get something off the ground. Unfortunately, it didn't materialize, or hasn't yet. But
hasn't yet.
Incredible.
Yeah, Michael Stewart, one of the co-founders, was on the show just a few weeks back. So I'm good friends with them as well. So they do some great work planting trees and sea trees and mangroves and kelp forests. I think a lot of this work that you're doing, I mean, I know, and you guys have talked about this, saying that, your statistic is that 50% of your sailors, that's your passengers, said that their voyage with Virgin inspired them to live more sustainably. So it definitely is influencing not only the industry and other companies and other cruise lines, but your sailors. So that leads me to the question, you're inspiring a lot, you're motivating, but why do you do what you do? What drives you every day to show up and do this work? Because as we pointed out, it takes patience. It can be frustrating. It's not moving fast enough. People are like, are you for real? So what really, what drives you every day to do this work?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to put it into words. It's just been part of, my personal passion really ever since I can remember, of, wanting to care for the planet and other people as well. And I think what drives me every day is like when I do see that interest or spark from a colleague of like, they get excited about it, like really feeding off of other people's energy and advancing things together, because sometimes you feel like you're not making progress. I think that's very common in this role. But when you find someone else who shows a curiosity or sees an opportunity or gets excited, like you just know that you can move that much further, faster. So I think what drives me in the end is just, that hope that we really can create a better world and a more equitable world. And we can each play a part in that. So I think my overall life goal is just to make sure that I'm proud of the career path that I've chosen and that I'm able to look back and say, I made that happen, right? Like I was part of making decarbonization happen in the cruise industry, for example, or, addressing climate change in some way. So it's hard to put it into words, but I really just feel like it's like a vocation. It's a calling that I've had since I can remember.
You can almost see it. I can almost see it visibly, like getting to you, because it's work, right? It's your life's work. I mean, this is a big deal. And I think, you're already there. It seems like you've already kind of, reached that point of having this impact and doing, knowing that you've been part of something really exciting. Speaking of kind of future thinking, you guys have a commitment to be net zero by 2050, which is what we need to do. That's sort of in line with science-based targets. Are you guys doing anything with, let's say, science-based targets, or have you considered, being a certified B Corp? Kind of, I know you were climate neutral at one point. Any of those certifications or sort of stamps in your future?
I've had my eye on B Corp. I think, just knowing the Virgin mandate of we are set up with the purpose of changing business for good. When I think of a B Corp being a benefit corporation and having a net benefit on society and the planet, like I feel like it's already aligned.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's a future aspiration. I understand it involves like changing the charter of a company, and I'm not in a position to say that that's something that we would be open to, but I'm certainly aligned, philosophically, if you will, with what that seeks to achieve. And as far as climate neutral, I mean, we did offset when we first launched our ship. It was the last step we could take, to kind of do one more thing. And so we offset our carbon footprint in 2020 when we actually took possession of our ship, and we were going to launch in 2020. And then, we already talked about what happened after that. So we weren't able to continue with that commitment after 2021. Instead, we shifted our focus to, okay, we know that 2050 is really where we need to have the end in sight. And so what we really need to do now is shift the offsetting to investing in how we're going to decarbonize. So the solutions for sustainable fuel. So we knew that would be the solution all along, that we would be making that pivot. We just made it sooner. Thankfully, we made it sooner than we thought we probably would, because the world changed. And so, so I think for the 2050 side of things, right now the hard work has started, and we have a target to share more detailed. We have our high level climate action plan, but now we're getting into the detailed work. We've been doing that for some time on, okay, well, what target are we setting for 2030, 2040? Like, how are we actually going to get there?
Yeah. So that'll be forthcoming. So we'll be able to check that out soon then, I guess at some point, as
for it. That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. I'll start to wrap this up here so that you can get back to all of the things that you're working on, because there's a lot going on. But my last couple questions here for you, hopefully that feels within reach, kind of that net zero approach. Are there things that sort of feel just out of reach, though? Mostly, is it that carbon neutrality? That sounds like it's the biggest topic that's still the biggest challenge for you to face. Is that true?
For sure. Decarbonization is a monumental task. And, I think there is, of course, a question of like, will it actually happen? Like, will any industry, including our industry, actually decarbonize? And will we do it at the speed that's required, right, to avoid catastrophic climate change? I know that's the real conversation that everyone in this role has.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if our industry, or any industry for that matter, will really arise, but I believe it's possible, right? And I believe like we have to try. So, that's the only thing we can do, is just like try to get there and try our hardest to get there, because if we don't get there, there's really severe consequences for humanity and biodiversity and everything. So, so I think on that note, not to end on a Debbie Downer, but it's like,
we won't, don't worry.
We have to try.
And that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you showing up every day. It's like, we are running out of time. We've got to try. Yeah. What do you want? We kind of opened this up with, I had told myself I would never go on a cruise. Like I had no desire, didn't want to. And then we did. We did went to Alaska, because I really, I heard, I was listening to NPR one day, and they're talking about the glaciers melting, and helicopter pilots are like, hey, every year it's hit or miss. And I came home to my wife. I'm like, we have to go take the kids to the glaciers. And she got excited, and she booked us a cruise. It was fun. It was great. I'd love to see you guys go up to Alaska. That'd be great. But your experience looks so great. What do you want people, though, to understand about any of this? A big part of me is people they don't always see behind the scenes. So whether it's about your role, about sustainability, about the cruise line industry, about climate change, decarbonization, what is it? Is there anything, though, that pops to your mind that you just really wish or you want people to understand better and just sort of know? What should they know about all of this that they might not?
Yeah, I know it's a tricky question. And the reason why I'm struggling with it a little bit is because the approach we've taken is that we've like really just tried to embed sustainability into everything that we do and have it not be something that's like a dilemma, right? Like we're like, well, what should I eat? Like, on the cruise, like we've tried to make it easy for people, no matter if they're shopping, eating, going on a tour, that they don't have to think about it. They don't have to worry about, they can just enjoy their vacation, right? Because we're working with developing sustainable tours when you're on shore. We're looking at how we source our food and making sure that we're upholding high standards. We're making sure that when you're in your cabins, like the lights are automatically adjusting based on if you're in the room or not. And so that part is really beautiful that it's already baked in. And so honestly, sailors may not notice, but I would like people to walk away. I guess when I think about like our products specifically, to have a great vacation, but also to maybe more explicitly acknowledge like, wow, Virgin really does care about sustainability and social impact, and like be able to think of a specific example of how that showed up for them. So the fact that more than 50% of sailors say that they're inspired to live more sustainably after their cruise. I would love for that number to increase and for there to be like specific things where they had like an aha moment on the cruise that inspired them to do something differently afterwards, right? So what we haven't unpacked as part of our survey that I would love to understand, like what they're answering that question, yes. Is it more on a personal sustainability side, like to slow down, to take care of themselves, focus on wellness? Or is it, we know based on the questions and how we ask it, there is a part B about like, are you inspired to eliminate more single-use plastics in your day-to-day life? That's oftentimes checked. But some of the ones I would have expected to see checked aren't. And so I really want to understand more of like, what is it about the voyage that inspired them? And what more could we do to inspire them even further? So I think it's finding that balance. I don't know if there's one thing that I would want them to walk away with. But, there's something that is just something that can't be replicated anywhere else, but on a cruise is like just the beauty of the ocean. And so if anything, it's just like having that appreciation and the understanding of this like beautiful planet that we live on, and what a privilege it is to travel to different places and cultures and see that, while there's trade-offs and there's always impacts, that there is a way to do things better and differently and to travel responsibly. I think maybe it's inspiring people to travel responsibly, or travel more sustainably. And I don't think that we've like cracked that code, but if there's one thing that I could hopefully inspire somehow in time that I work in this role, maybe it's to have people walk away with a deeper appreciation of what responsible, sustainable tourism looks like.
Well, you're making it easy for them. And I think that was really well put. I think it's a big challenge to make it so that your guests or your sailors can just have the experience and not have to think about it. Like that is the goal for me too. Or what I push is that if you've got a brand, if you're selling things, you shouldn't have to go to a different section to get the sustainability stuff. It's just, no, you go do what you do, get what you need. We're here. We got you covered. All behind the scenes. You're pulling all the levers, turning all the dials. I think that was a good one. So I think that's really great. Let's end with this then, with some positivity. Maybe hopefully there's some positive advice you can give to people who are coming into this space. They are, doing a pivot at their company or their brand. They're building a program. They're hiring somebody, or they're learning more about all of this. What advice do you have to people at any stage in their careers, early, mid, later, executives? What do you want people to hear and know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a similar advice that I received when I was trying to figure out, well, I know I'm passionate about these things, but what does it look like in practice? It's like, just follow your passion. Because if you're doing what you love, what's the saying is, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So So I think from that point of view, like following your passion, doors open up. That's certainly been the case for me. And I've heard many accounts where that's been the case, where they've been able to see how doors have opened for them. But then the other thing is like, just make sure, I think, focusing on relationship building and influence management, like those two skills, which don't require like technical expertise. It's more about just figuring out how to get along, with others from various backgrounds and departments. Like that's so fundamental to this type of role. And anyone can, I would say, master that, right? And then also there's so much room for opportunity, no matter what kind of job you have, for doing something regarding sustainability. So you don't have to have sustainability in your title. And this is something that I've shared many times with people that show an interest in sustainability. I'm like, the work that we need to do is so broad and so, so big. Like we need everyone to be doing this, no matter what their role is. It's as simple as it might be. So like, just start somewhere. I think when I first started in my role, I was, a little overwhelmed. I was learning the industry. And one thing that just really bothered me, and I'm like, I moved from San Francisco to Florida, and like the recycling situation in like the break room was a disaster. And I'm like, okay, we're fixing this. Like that was where I started, because I knew I could do it.
Yeah.
And I knew I could make sense of it. And it would get noticed, but it was like low hanging fruit. Like just start somewhere.
Yeah, that's good advice. Every role plays a role. That's our language over here as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jill. That was really insightful. I have so many other questions. I almost feel like maybe I'm going to bring you back for part 2 if I can, because I would love to get into kind of the nitty gritty, which we couldn't really do, and just in terms of all your initiatives. But I'll leave the notes there so people can go explore the website, watch your videos. That JLo Gen AI campaign that you guys are doing is so funny, so good. So we'll put all that in there. And I just urge people to go check out your impact reports. We'll dive in. I think we get to work together on your next one. Hopefully, I hope we do. But I think Parallax has done those last 2 sustainability reports for you. There's a lot of great detail in there. It's really great initiatives. It's beautiful, and it's easy to read, easy to follow. I think people will appreciate it. Is there anything we left out, or should we call it?
So. It's been a good conversation. Again, I feel like I've talked your ear off. So thanks.
That's
again.
The point.
Thanks for the opportunity and interest, and for the work that you do, sharing good news. We don't hear enough of that these days. So
right, and there's definitely good things happening over there. So thank you, Jill. Thanks so much. I'll talk with you soon. See you out on the high seas, perhaps. But if not, thank you for being here. And again, you guys go check out Virgin Voyages, all the great work that they're doing, and have a great day. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Hey, thanks for listening. This is a show produced by the Underswell and our School of Understanding. If you're interested in being a part of this movement and want to dive deeper into the art of understanding sustainability better so that you can do things better, be sure to visit us at theunderswell.com. We offer structured, easy-to-follow workshops, courses, and member resources to make sustainability a part of your career or lifestyle. Because remember, no matter what role you play a role, and we're here for you. Thanks again.